This video introduces the BASK Trip Planner as it exists in November 2023. The Trip Planner was created and is maintained by our own Joe Petalino, and he's added a bunch of pretty great features over the past couple of years. I'm showing the browser version of the Trip Planner. The mobile version works a little differently, but does the same things. Before I go through the features of the Trip Planner, let me point to the Help tab. The Trip Planner has excellent documentation, and it's all here, including some details I won't go into. First, the interface. This is the map area. This key has types of information you can display in the map. And this is the info panel with tabs for different types of information. I'm going to click this X to save some space. Let's look at the map area. Here are the zoom controls. You can also zoom with your mouse. These two icons don't zoom. They just magnify or reduce the map, making it easier to read on a small screen. The map drop-down lets you choose between different types of maps. Notice particularly these two flavors of electronic chart. They're equivalent, they just differ in colors and symbols. Even though this one is called Classic, it gives an electronic chart, not the old PDF charts. The electronic charts on the Trip Planner don't have all the functionality you would get with a chart plotter app. For instance, you can't click on a buoy symbol to get more information. Let's go through the key below the map. Yellow pins are put-ins, red pins are destinations, which are places where you can land but typically not put in. Green tide pins represent stations where tide levels are measured or calculated, and blue current pins do the same for currents. The tide and current pins that have fainter coloring are subordinate, meaning they're less accurate. See the Help tab for details. When you first load the Trip Planner, you see the information for this current station outside the gate. You can click on any other pin to see info for that location. Okay, let's look at the two ways in which the map can show currents. This is powerful. First, clicking ebb and flow adds arrows to the current pins. The length and direction of each arrow tells you the predicted strength and direction of the current at that point. Dragging the red cursor line in the info panel shows how the currents change over time. Second, these two buttons, called Currents and Winds, display the short-term predictions of the San Francisco Bay Operational Forecasting System, or OFS. What's the difference? The info panel and the ebb and flow arrows show standard current predictions, which are driven by astronomical information, mainly the positions of the sun and the moon. These predictions have no way to respond to real-time events, such as storms or wet winters. The OFS, by contrast, uses real-time data to predict what will actually happen in the bay over the next 2 days. To predict currents, it plugs river flows and other real-time data into a hydrodynamic model of the bay. When there's a big storm or heavy runoff, this OFS prediction will diverge from the standard prediction and will be more accurate. However, the model on which it's based has limitations. For instance, it's pretty low res. If you look for eddies that we know exist, they're not always shown. NOAA would love to improve this model if they had the budget. The OFS winds forecast probably won't be better than what you get with your preferred weather source. However, it does show at a glance how the wind is likely to interact with the current, where you'll have wind versus current, for instance. To see the OFS prediction for any location on the bay, just click that spot. You can also choose between particles and arrows depictions, and see the Help tab for more details. Okay, back to the rest of the map key. The restricted area pin shows restricted areas. Clicking on an area brings up details in the info panel. I'll let you see the Help tab for your coast and the Bay Area Water Trail. This Charts button gives you access to our BASK charts, which are designed to be printed out, laminated, and put under your deck bungees. These charts are based on the old, non-electronic NOAA PDF charts, which are more legible as printouts than NOAA's electronic charts. Clicking on a chart outline gives you the option to open the chart in your browser or download it. Now let's look at the info panel. I'll start with the Tides tab, which is the one we use most. The Tides tab shows not just tides, but also currents. If you have a tide pin selected, it shows the tide levels for that location, and if you have a current pin selected, it shows the currents. If you select a put-in or destination pin, The Tides tab shows the info for either a nearby tide pin, as in this case, or for a nearby current pin, as over here. A green star marks the pin whose data is being shown. Let's look at the graph for this tide pin. The horizontal axis is time, with noon in the middle and day in white. The vertical axis is the tide height in feet. Now let's pick this current pin. For currents, the vertical axis is current speed. The blue curves represent the flood phases of the current when the water is moving in from the gate toward the ends of the bay. You see that the current speed increases from 0 to max flood and then decreases back to 0. The green curves represent the ebb phases of the current when the water is moving back toward the gate. The current speed increases from 0 to max ebb and then decreases back to 0. By convention, ebb current speeds are given as negative numbers. The minus sign just means that the water is moving in the ebb direction. When ebb and flow is turned on, you also get dynamic numerical data for the selected current pin. And down here for both tides and currents, you get tabular info. And now I do want to mention one distinction between the main current stations and the subordinate ones. This is one of the main current stations. Notice that the current arrow on the map almost goes in a circle. This is what really happens. At this nearby subordinate station, the arrow just goes in two directions. These are the directions in which the water is moving at max flood and max ebb. In between those times, you can't take the arrow direction as accurate. Okay, back to the stuff in the info panel. When ebb and flow is turned on, you get controls for it here. See the Help tab for details. In this area, you can advance by a day or a week, go to today, or bring up a calendar. You can see the info for a weekend or for 2, 4, or 7 days. This hourly option breaks out the tabular data into hourly increments. This box gives some astronomical information. The thing your eyes should go to here is the phase of the moon, because the moon phase tells you basically what the tides and currents will do. At a full or new moon, you get a high tide roughly in the middle of the day, and hence a morning flood and afternoon ebb. A half moon gives the opposite, along with generally weaker tides and currents. Let me comment that the weather info shown here is a zone forecast. More on this in relation to the Weather tab. Among these handy links, let me point to these two NOAA 48-hour forecasts. These are NOAA's depictions of the same data that you get with the Trip Planner's Currents and Winds buttons. Clicking the Weather tab brings up the zone forecast for this large zone. However, clicking NOAA Point Forecast up here will open the Marine Point Forecast for the small area right around the selected pin. A point forecast can be quite different from the larger zone forecast, so it's important to know which one you're looking at. You can also get the windy forecast. Unfortunately, Magic Seaweed got folded into Surfline, so this button now takes you to the Surfline forecast. Okay, the Details tab. If I have a Put-in or Destination pin selected, this tab gives a lot of specific booties-on-the-ground information, including parking, facilities, and launchability on different tide levels. If I select a tide or current pin, I get info about that station. Directions lets you get driving directions. The Search tab is powerful. In addition to searching for a location by name, you can search for specific tide or current predictions and for other things. See the Help tab for details. The Measure tab is where you can plot out a route and find coordinates, distances, and directions. The Help info gives complete instructions, so I'll just do a quick demo. Finally, 3 ways to save space. As we've seen, clicking this X hides the disclaimer and header. Clicking Map hides the info panel. Clicking Tides brings it back. Within the Tides tab, clicking this X minimizes the tide or current graph. That's the amazing Trip Planner. Thanks, Joe.